Hey, welcome back. So today I'm going to go over a few more items from phase two, the 17X portion of the Air Force's cyber officers course. So this is before you split into your Delta or your Sierra specific classes. So this is right before that. This is in the phase right before that. And two of the things I'm going to go over in this portion, and I'll do a video later on the rest of it. But I think these kind of need their own is PowerShell and Sec Plus. And so I'm going to start with PowerShell. I'm not going to do a deep dive on PowerShell. That's not the point of this. The point of this is just to give you an introduction of the level that you would need, that they expect from you. So if you want to try to prepare, you can. I'm actually going to go through an exercise to show you what they're expecting. So if you know some PowerShell and you see this exercise, and I'll post the prompt for this or the directions for this exercise in the description. So if you want to try it, you can. I just wrote this, but if you want to see, oh yeah, I know enough to be able to pass, I'm not worried about it, then you can, just move on. If you don't know what I'm talking about here, then you can do a little bit of research on PowerShell, figure out what you would need to know to be able to do this little exercise, this practice I'm going to do that will get you ready. If you can do the practice I'm about to go through and you can do it confidently without an issue, you'll be just fine for PowerShell. So let's quickly talk about what PowerShell is, why we use it. PowerShell, by definition, is a task-based command line shell and scripting language that's been designed specifically for Windows System admin, right? And why do we use that in the Air Force? Because the Air Force runs on Windows. And if you're not in the Air Force, you will soon realize that once you get in, we do everything on Microsoft. Everything is Windows. And if you're in the Air Force, you already know that. So you have to know how to do some task automation, and that's what PowerShell is for. You can use it to do system diagnostics. You can use it for data logging, doing account audits. You can use it for opening applications, closing applications. It lets you interface with your machine using a command line instead of a graphic user interface, the mouse and buttons. And sometimes it's actually beneficial to what you're doing, depending on what kind of like sysadmin stuff that you might be doing. So with that being said, I'm going to open this up here. So like I said, I built this little PowerShell practice mostly for you to gauge kind of what level they're expecting from you at the schoolhouse. And if you need to work to get up to this level, then you've got some time to do it before you come. And if you already know this kind of stuff, then great. You don't have to worry about this here. So let me get this opened up here. All right, here we go. So I've got over my notepad on the side, I've got the kind of the directions for the practice exercise. Then over on the right side, I've got the PowerShell ISEs. So I'm just going to read through the directions real quick. Then we'll start. So the first thing we need to do is create a function called BuildArray. We're going to ask a user to input a number between 1 and 500, 8 different times, and store each of those in an array. And if the number is out of range, we're going to print invalid input and try again. And then we're going to reprompt. And once the array has 8 valid numbers, we're going to print the full array to the screen, call the function ClassifyArray, and then pass the array. So let's get started with this. So the first thing we're going to do is create a function called BuildArray. So the first thing we're going to do is just create a function. We're going to call this BuildArray. And the way that you lay out your scripting and your language is going to be different from person to person. This is the way I do it. It's just easy for me. So once we have that, we're going to go ahead and create an array. And an array is just a list of either integers or strings. If you're not familiar with PowerShell, you'll learn that if you do some little bit of research on it before you get there. And so we're just going to create an empty array that we're going to use later. And so let me get this made here. And then we have to create a loop. Now, loops are one of the big things that they go over at this portion of the class in the cyber officers course. There's a bunch of different loops: do until, do while, for loops. So be familiar with loops if you're not already. So for our loops, we're going to make a for loop. So for, and actually I'm just going to do the shortcut here. So Control J, I'm going to find the for loop there because it already lays it out. And I need to make a loop that runs 8 times, right? Because I'm looking for 8 numbers. And I want it to continue to create this loop until we are at or less than or equal to 8. And then I'm going to create the script that's asking the user to input a valid number between 1 and 500. So I'm just going to do, I'm going to create a variable, and a variable is just a container that stores information. Again, if you don't know what that is, do a little bit of research on PowerShell, you will find out. Again, this is mostly for you if you know a little bit of PowerShell to be able to see what level they're expecting you to be at for this course. So we're going to create a variable, and then we're going to do read host, which is going to put what I'm about to type up on the screen to the user. So I'm going to say, please input a number between 1 and 500. 500. Okay, so that's going to pop up on the screen, asking them for a number between 1 and 500. And then I've got to give it some parameters because it needs to be between 1 and 500. And actually, I'm going to make this, I'm going to put this here in the front int, which means integer, so that they can only input a integer or a number. And then I'm going to put an if statement. So if x is less than LT, if x is less than 1, or variable x is greater than 500, there we go, then this is what I want it to do if that is the case. So if that happens, then I want to write to the screen, what does it say here? Invalid input, try again. All right. And just for fun, we're going to make that red. All right, because we want to make sure people understand that that was wrong. Okay, so we're going to do that and put that in red. And then after that, we're going to go down here and we're going to do this, I minus minus. And all we're telling it to do is if they put this in, which is wrong, we want to take 1 away from the counter up here. This I plus plus means that each time it goes through this loop, it adds 1 to this loop until I is less than or equal to 8. So it'll go through it 8 times. I don't want that to count because this was wrong. So I'm going to put minus minus, which essentially subtracts 1 from the loop. So the loop will keep going until the proper input is given, and it'll run it 8 times. Okay. So I'm going to do I equals or I minus minus. And then, so that's my if statement. So if it does that, that's wrong. Don't add that to the counter. Else is going to be my otherwise, if in normal human language. Otherwise, this is what I want it to do. I want it to write, or I wanted to add x to that num array that we created earlier. I wanted to add it to this list. So I'm going to do num array plus equals, which means add what I'm about to put, and I want it to add x. Okay. And then let's see, invalid input, or once the array has 8 valid numbers, print the full array to the screen. So once it has, get out of here, once it has full number. So once that gets to 8, right? Once the counter ticks all the way up to 8, less than or equal to 8, then I want it to, what does it say? Print the full array to the screen. So I'm going to come down here outside of these brackets here, and I'm going to print the array. So I want to print num array. And then I want to call the function ClassifyArray and pass the array. So then I'm going to call the function, which is going to be the next one you'll see we're going to build here in just a minute, ClassifyArray, and let's see, ClassifyArray, and then we need to pass the num array that we just built. Okay, and if it's also all this sounds like gibbled, garbled, weird language, that's fine. It will sound like that once you first start. Again, I'm going to put the directions for this into the information below. So you can grab this, you can plug it into your favorite AI format and say, teach me what I need to know to get to this level of understanding, and it will go through the whole thing. The main thing you have to understand is we're just doing logic here. You can say, if this happens, do this. And it's really simple once you kind of get your brain into the logic thinking mode. It's just learning how to talk to a computer in a logical way. And once you get that, it's really not that difficult. So that was our first one. All right, so the next one is create a function called ClassifyArray that accepts 1 parameter. So we'll add that in there in a minute. Use a loop to go through each number and classify it. So we're going to probably use a for each loop. And classify 2 ways using the modulus operator and comparison operators, even or odd, and large, greater than or equal to 250, or less, smaller than 250. And for each number, print something like number is even and large, number is odd and small. After all 8 numbers are classified, print a count of how many were even and how many were odd, then call a function called type test. Okay, so we need to create a loop that goes through that array, that list that we just put. So then the user input 8 numbers. They're now in this list, this array. Now in this one, we're going to go through the array and we're going to create logic that tells the computer classify each one of the numbers in this array as either being, what I say, small and even, or large and odd. And so we're just going to write logic that tells the computer how we want that to work. So we're going to create a function here. Not create function. Let's just try the word function, and then we're going to do classify array, and then we're going to pass the array here, and I'm just going to call it num array. You don't have to call it that. You can call it anything you want, but I'm just going to pass it down so that the computer knows in context that I'm still pulling that array down into this function. Okay. And then we're going to create our brackets to start working within this function. Okay. So classify that accepts one parameter, use a loop to go through each number. Okay. And so let's figure out where we're at here. Okay. So like I said before, we're going to use a for each loop. So we're going to do for each, and then for each item. And as I'm talking this out, you can kind of understand how this sounds like I'm telling the computer to do what I want to do. For each item in that numbered array, so for each of the 8 numbers that the user typed in earlier, so for each item in num array, just in. For each item in num array, what do I want it to do? And you put these brackets after you give directions to tell it, this is what I want you to do based on what I just told you. So for each item in the numbered array, and then in between these brackets, do what I'm telling you to do here. So for each item in number array, let's see, we're going to use a modulus operator. So the modulus operators is an arithmetic function, just like you'd have like the plus sign, like you have the plus sign, the minus sign if you wanted to do subtraction. Multiplication is going to be showed by the star. Division is going to be showed by the backslash. The modulus is kind of a weird one because you don't really typically learn this one in your normal math class. But the modulus is you're dividing a number, and then you're taking the remainder of that division, and that's the modulus. All right. So 5 modulus 2 would be, so 5 divided by 2 equals 2, right? So 2 times 2 equals 4, with a remainder of what? 1. So 5 modulus 2 is 1. I'm just looking for the remainder, right? And you can use a modulus to find out if numbers are even or odd, because all you have to do is take the number and modulus by 2. So if the number divided by 2 has a remainder of 0, that means that number is even, right? So 6 divided by 2 is 3. There is no remainder. So I can use that to figure out what an even number is. If I do 7 modulus 2, for instance, I'm going to have a remainder because it'll be 1, right? So that's how you can tell the computer to differentiate between even and odd numbers. So these are going to take a while to write out. So I'm just going to go ahead and write all these out, and I'll bring you back here once I've got all these written out so that you can go ahead and see those. So be back in just a second. Okay, so we're back. So I went ahead and wrote out because there's a bunch of them, because there's basically four different versions that we can have here. Large and even, small and even, large and odd, small and odd. So I did the for each item in the numbered array. I wrote a comment. So if you start a line with the hashtag or the pound symbol, that doesn't go into your code. It's just a comment that you can write into your script so that somebody coming after you can understand what it is that you were trying to script out, or if you need a reminder yourself, you can keep yourself sane. So I wrote out for each item in the array, if the item is modulus 2 equals 0, which means it's even, then, and the item is less than 249, which makes it small according to our directions, then I want you to write to the screen, the number is even and small. I gave it a color, and then I added it to a list called evens. And then I did the same thing for all the other ones. If it's odd and small, if it's odd and large, if it's an even and large, then it gets written to a list. And then the rest of the directions were, after all 8 numbers are classified, print out a count of how many were even and how many were odd, then call a function called type test. So at the end, I put write host, which means print out to the screen, evens equal, and then I put the evens bucket container, the variable that I was adding all those even numbers to. and then right host odds equals and the bucket of odds that I had put. So it'll show me how many were even and how many were odd. And then I called the next function, which was type test number array. Type test, and then I add the number array too, because I'm going to need it for the next one. All right. So for the last one, we're going to create a function called type test and ask the user to enter any number from the array. Do input validation using the in to confirm the number exists in the array, and if not, print not found, try again, and the reprompt. And then I'm going to write out the number a bunch of different ways so that you can see how PowerShell looks at numbers depending on how you input them into the system. So we are going to start with that now. So we're going to do function type test. Yeah, I'll just make that. And then we're going to call this one again. And then we're going to create our brackets. And this is the brackets are telling us what I want to do in this function again, right? So for this one, we're going to do a do until loop, which means it's going to continue to go through the loop until a certain criteria is met, right? So we're going to do a do, and literally write do, and then we're going to do our brackets again here. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Fix that. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do what? We want to create a variable to do this number exists in the array. All right, so do this. We're going to print this to the screen. X equals read host. Please enter. I'm just going to ask to enter a number from the array. So enter any number from the array. Okay. So the user is going to put a number that they typed in before from the array that they made. And then we're going to create the condition statement of what I want to happen. So if X is, let's see, how do we want to do this? If it's not, we're going to print, if it's not in the number, if they put in a number that was not in the array, then we want to print not found, try again. Okay, so if X is not in, not in the num array, in the list we created earlier, then what do I want it to do? I want it to do this. I want you to write to the screen, write host, not found, try again, exclamation point, and again, we'll just go ahead and make this red because we want them to know that they're in trouble, right? So write host, not found, try again, foreground color is gonna be red, and then, so that's what will happen if they type in a number that is not correct, okay? And then what we want to do is we want to just store and print the number a bunch of different ways. So the way that we're going to do that, because they only ask for us to type one number in, so we're just going to do that once. And then in here, we're going to store and show the numbers a bunch of different ways. So we're going to do it as a string, which is what the computer will look at it as like a word, not as a number. So we're going to define how we want this. We want to write string, if I can type correctly. So string X, so which will print it out as a string. And then it said to print it out as a double divided by 3. Okay, so that we can see how the and so double means it'll print the number including decimal points if that happens, which it will if we divide by 3. So double there, and then we're going to take X and divide it by 3. And then we need to do it as an integer as well, right? Yeah, as a string, and then we're going to add another string to it. So you'll see how that works. So we're going to do it as a string, and then X plus, and we're just going to add a string. And the strings are always encapsulated in quotation marks, 999. Okay. And then what is it? Oh yeah, all right. And at the end, we're going to write, I am a PowerShell master. Okay. And then we're going to run it and see if I got any errors. Okay, looks like I did. Line 56, chart 1. Why am I getting an error there? And real time troubleshooting. Oh, I think I had an extra one in here. Okay. And then, yep. I'm missing the while or until keyword in the do loop. I did not write that in my loop. Oh, yeah, of course I forgot my until. Until X is found in that num array. Yeah, that's what I need. All right, let's try on that again. 73. These go with that one goes with that one. Ah, there. My bracket's wrong. There we go. All right. So let's go ahead and put that first function in here. Okay, please input a number. That's what it asks us to do. And just to show you that our parameters are working well, if I try to enter a negative number, it won't let me do it. If I try to enter something over 500, it won't let me do it. So I'll just go ahead and put a few numbers in here. 269, 488, 321, 25, 67, 500, and 302. Okay. And then you see it did everything that I asked it to do. It listed out all the numbers, told me which ones are odd and small, odd and large, even and large, odd and large, all those. Oh, battery's on low. I should probably plug in my computer. And then it showed you how many even numbers were in that list, how many odd numbers were in that list. And then we need to enter a number from the array. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the number 25. And what it did with that, down here in the code, we said we wanted to take it, write it as a string. So I just wrote it as 25 here. And then we wanted to take the number divided by 3 to include decimal points, which it did, so 8.333. And then write it as a string, which is as a word, not a number, and then add the word 999 to it. So that's why it wrote 25999 instead of adding the numbers 25 and 999 to get 1024. And then I wrote, I'm a PowerShell master. So there you go. So that was a little bit long, I know, and again, I'll put these directions down into the information of the video below. But I just wanted to show you that's about the level they're expecting you to be at for the schoolhouse at Keesler. So if you can do that, you know about loops, you know how to write the verb noun context for PowerShell, you know how to do modulus, plus, minus, you know how to do your less than, greater than, equal than, all those, you'll be just fine. So that is that for PowerShell. So let's talk about the next portion. Okay, so for Sec Plus, when you go into phase 2, before you do PowerShell, the first thing that you have to do is Sec Plus. So CompTIA Security Plus is currently required for you to go through the course and for you to continue on through the course. Now, the problem with this, not the problem, the challenge with this is they only give you 1 week to get certified, okay? And if any of you have taken Sec Plus before, you know that is not nearly enough time, at least it would not be enough time for me, to be able to pass that course. So, and they don't teach you the course either. So it's not like you're even in a boot camp. They literally give you materials, say, go home and study for a week, and then you come in and take the test. I think you can fail it once, retest, and if you fail it again, then I think you wash out. So my suggestion to you, if you are looking at coming to this course, or if you know that you're coming to this course, or you're slotted to come to this course, start studying for Sec Plus now. And not only start studying for it now, if you can take it on your own before you get to Keesler, that will make a world of difference. Because as long as you've taken it before you get here, all you have to do is show them your certificate saying, yep, took it. Here's my certificate that I passed. Then you can bypass that block, which means you may be able to jump ahead to another class to finish a week early, or you'll just hang out for a week. If you've not heard of Sec Plus, do some research on it. My recommendations for studying for it would be look at Professor Messer. He's kind of the gold standard if you're unfamiliar with that test. he's kind of the gold standard for prepping for that. He's got a bunch of videos on YouTube that will help you. He's also got some paid resources that you can get from his website. You can do that. If you're in the military, you've got access to Udemy. So go to Udemy and you can look at Dion Training is another really popular one. You can check out Andrew Ramadial. He's also on Udemy. I actually really like his teaching style a lot. Not everybody does, but it worked well for me. Learn all your ports, learn all your vocabulary, because there is a lot. It's a big test. It's not easy. At least it was not easy for me. So would highly recommend that you start studying for that now. That'll put you in good shape for when you get to Keesler. All right, so that's it for this video. I'll go over the rest of phase 2 in another one because this one was long enough. If you've got any questions about the course, throw them into a comment or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll have that in my description box below as well. Talk to anyone who's looking at possibly coming, and would be happy to get you as well prepared as I can. All right. Have a good one. Talk to you later.